have Rachel speaking today. I'm very excited. She's going to talk about her journey, why she's doing this project with cryptocurrency, what it is, why it's not like GoFundMe, but it kind of is. So, Rachel, thank you for coming today. Welcome, Rachel, to the stage. That's your whole bio. Sorry. I know I need to learn more about it.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this morning to listen to this talk. What I'll try to do is I'll talk about Seeds, the startup I founded, and my journey and sort of the learnings along the way and what it's led me to believe about where we're heading. I'm also very interested in spirituality and the intersection of spirituality and tech, and that I think cryptocurrency kind of opens up spaces for that. So that'll come into the talk as well. Here we go. Okay, so I founded Seeds. Seeds allows anyone to redeem a token to ask for money and receive it as a gift with no strings attached. So to make sure you guys understand that we're legit, let's see. We went through Boost VC, the first Bitcoin-focused startup accelerator in 2014. Adam Draper runs that, if you guys are familiar with the Drapers. We went through Techstars in New York in 2015. And then we did Techcrunch Disrupt Battlefield in 2016. So if you've seen Silicon Valley, this is Richard looking awkward in that competition. So we did the real version of that. We didn't win, but it was fun. What else? We've raised a little more than $1 million in sort of traditional angel funding, and we've been profitable since last year was our first profitable year. And our fanciest team member was the number 2 engineer at WhatsApp. So that's like the resume-y stuff. Word up. So this is our website. I already told you what Seeds is. I'll go into a little bit more about the journey of how it got to where it's at today. My story. So I started out as a futures and equities trader in Chicago and New York. It was really fun. I was career profitable. Probably many of you come from financial backgrounds. I wouldn't be surprised. I feel like there's a lot of exodus from finance into tech, or sort of a segue. I always made money, but I was always one of the only women or the only woman everywhere I traded. And I saw things, and this is when I was like 24, 25, and I wasn't awake to sort of these blockages in the world. But at one particular job, I later found out I was paid 15% less than all the dudes that started when I did, despite having a better educational background and making money at other firms. And I could have more aggressively negotiated the starting salary, so that was within my control. But it just made me think about, like, why is this the case? All of these things that I was told are supposed to mean I will make more money actually didn't come into play within this system. And later at that job, whenever the bonuses were actually performance-based, mine was considerably bigger than all those dudes that started when I did. But it made me angry, and it made me start to think about, like, systemically why this was the case. So, yeah, and the other thing is that it was just inefficient and illogical. I mean, if somebody's going to make you more money based on these background items like education or whatever, these things that we're told are supposed to indicate those things, they should get paid more money, but I wasn't. So why was that the case? At this time, I also started to get more interested in various spiritual sort of explorations. And there's this guy, Mark Epstein, is anyone familiar with his work? Nah? Okay. He's a Harvard MD. He's written several books. He wrote one that I really resonated with about the intersection of meditation and psychology. And he defined in one of the books this idea of the divine masculine and divine feminine, in the sense that the masculine is the doing energy and the feminine is the being energy. And this was just a little nugget of something that I sort of picked up on at that time and then started to think more about later. But I started to consider how we're all taught to be doing all the time. We're taught to overvalue the doing. We're taught to be productive. We're supposed to feel guilty if we're not being productive. And it's just kind of this strange overemphasis on that idea. And I felt like I could see it interplaying in the financial system in this way that just didn't seem balanced. I also came across the work of Ken Wilber. Anybody know who he is? Right on, cool. Yeah, one of my teammates was very interested in his work, and he he went to Duke and dropped out. I'm a Duke undergrad. But I have a cursory understanding of the thoughts he shared. But as it relates to this talk, he talks about this idea that as societies evolve, we sort of unlock new ways of being, new modes of being. And for example, like representative democracy isn't possible if a society is still like killing each other in the streets. If you can't walk down the street and assume that you're safe, sort of unthinkingly, representative democracy doesn't mean much. And so I was interested in this idea of like where we're at right now societally and where we're headed. There's still a lot of fear-based energy around, a lot of this idea that we need to protect what's ours, a lot of security focus. But I think we're shifting into a different way of being in which that's not going to be as necessary anymore. And so I was interested in kind of aligning the work that I was doing with that oncoming trend, something that I'm seeing there. And then this just made me think about being a trader, right? So if I made $1, somebody else lost that dollar. It was literally this like, it's a zero-sum paradigm. And, I minored in econ at Duke, and I just remember going to those classes and just being like, this doesn't make any sense in reality. Like, it makes sense within these systems that are man-made, within, trading systems, for instance. But money isn't scarce. Like, there are certain resources that are scarce. Many are replenishable. But money just is there, and it moves in strange ways because of these sort of institutional blockages and the way we think about it. So I started considering more about how that could shift. Anybody know who Doug Rushkoff is? Nah? Okay. Yeah, so I think he calls himself a media theorist. He wrote this book called Throwing Rocks at the Back of the Google Bus about what's gotten messed up in San Francisco because of tech and income disparity. And he has his idea, sort of like the thrust of his theory, as I understand it, is that the OS, the operating system of tech, is capitalism, which is why it's kind of skewed in this strange way. And I started thinking more about that, and I wanted to take it a step further. And this applies to socialism, communism, all of these systems that we've explored so far globally. I think that the OS of capitalism is patriarchy. So this idea of overvaluing the masculine, the doing energy again, and undervaluing the being, the intuitive, the chilling out and meditating and letting ideas come in to decide where to go. So as this relates to spirituality, if this is interesting to anybody here, I'm not sure if this crowd is super into that type of stuff, but after reflecting on this for a long time, I think that this masculine-feminine energy thing is probably the most pervasive duality that we're living in. And this idea of, in a spiritual sense, wanting to get to unity consciousness will mean that we'll need to transcend this duality. So, I think we're taught to overvalue the masculine and undervalue the feminine in ourselves. I think I have way too much masculine energy. I grew up and thought that I had to achieve and be valedictorian and go to a good school and whatever, make a bunch of money. And it, led to like a quarter-life crisis. And I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people. I feel like the existential crises are maybe happening younger and younger because we're waking up to how the system isn't healthy. It isn't taking care of us, and it isn't facilitating the creation of what we're most... the thing that we're uniquely able to bring. I think all of us are here to uniquely contribute something and make something that only we can make. And if you're going to school and you're told, it's great to be hired by Google when you graduate, but you're then fitting yourself into a system designed by somebody else, an exterior system. And I think there's something more important about being able to listen to yourself and then make the thing that you can uniquely create, rather than fitting yourself into something that already exists. So there's something about that I think relates to this. School is institutional. It's patriarchal too, I think. Many of them. Yeah, so then I started exploring more about this in a practical sense. So I was sitting on the trading desk at 3 a.m. one day in Chicago, trading the European shift, Treasury futures and Eurodollar futures. And I read this op-ed in the New York Times about microlending. You guys familiar with Kiva? And yeah, cool. Yeah, so this was 2009, 10 years ago now, wow. And I was just like, it was like a light bulb went off, this epiphany that I've only had a handful of so far in my life. And I was just like, whoa. I was trading. I was thinking about why there was misogyny in that space. Microlending was this alternate sort of mechanism for primarily benefiting women who were excluded from financial services in the developing world. And it was this great investment because they, in most regions, they repaid loans like 99% of the time. And at the time, I was also doing comedy stuff at Second City in Chicago. And the best sketch that I had written was a sketch called Mime Brothel, about a brothel full of mimes, this kind of abstract feminist thing. The joke was that, like, you'd think the prostitute was going to give a blowjob, but then she'd be, like, trapped in a wind tunnel or picking a daisy. It was this weird thing, but it played well on stage, but, like, 20 people would see it, maybe, on a good night. So I was also thinking about how I could make things that reach larger audiences. So as soon as I saw this article, it was like, well, what if I made a film about this topic? I would at least be interested in seeing that. And maybe that means that some other people would be as well. And hopefully more than 20 people would see a film. So yeah, I didn't know anything. I put up a post on Craigslist to find a director of photography. I found a guy who had worked on Fargo, Groundhog Day, just like this great guy on Craigslist. And once he was involved, then it became a legitimate project. So these are some pictures. This was us shooting in India. I think this was in northern India near Rishikesh. This was also in India. This is in the Ganges. This guy at the bottom is this guy named Vijay Mahajan. So he's credited as being sort of like the Muhammad Yunus of India. I think he wasn't as focused on marketing in the way that Yunus was, which was probably Yunus's brilliance, I think. Yeah, so he was doing a Shod Yatra, a walk of truth, to talk to the poor people of India who had been victimized by predatory lenders. There were suicides happening in India at that time. So we followed him around as he talked to the poor to figure out what was going on. We also shot in Kenya, in Paraguay, and in Detroit to see what was going on in like an American city that could use some additional financial mechanisms to help it out. In Kenya, so this is in 2011 that we filmed there. Are you guys familiar with mobile microlending and text message-based money transfer? Yeah, so I had this very Western, condescending assumption about what I would find in sub-Saharan Africa. And then I go there, and like they're so far ahead of us. Like, we didn't have Venmo. Venmo, I think, maybe Venmo had been founded at that time. But you go there, and everyone is text messaging money. Even in 2011, 40% of Kenya's GDP was sent through text. So because they didn't have landlines, they didn't have bank accounts, the tech just leapfrogged. And the woman that we filmed in Kenya was the same age as me at that time, 27. She was so much more financially successful because she opened these businesses using mobile microloans where she was like a human ATM. So people would come in and text message her money, and she'd give them cash or vice versa. And she was killing it. And there were like 25,000 of these types of stalls, M-Pesa stalls throughout Kenya. And it was fascinating. So I came back to the States and I was thinking, how can we get more money to people like this woman Tobogo that I met? It seems obvious that mobile money transfer is going to be a global thing in the nearest future. So there must be some ways to connect these industries in the developed world to these people in the developing world who can do a lot with this capital, with a limited amount of capital. So that's how Seeds came together. It incorporated in 2013, which is the same year I discovered Vipassana meditation. Does anyone know about Vipassana? Right on. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I just came back from my 14th 14th course on Sunday. Yeah, so it's become an essential part of my life, and I think it merges this masculine and feminine thing in a structure, in a more balanced way than I've seen anywhere else. So it's the best thing I've found in the world. But that said, yeah, I'll go into this next. So once while meditating, not that long ago, any like Leibniz scholars, people super familiar with Leibniz's work? Okay. Because I also just have this sort of small amount of understanding that I think is relevant for this talk. But once while meditating, after I think it was like Leibniz's, like Google had the image up and it was like happy 337th birthday Leibniz or whatever. And I was reading up more on what Leibniz had done. So he's credited with being the father of binary code, right? And my understanding is that he was trying to find a way to use numbers to communicate logic problems that were written. And he couldn't figure out how to do it, but he was reading the I Ching. And the I Ching is all about yin and yang, right? Those energies, the masculine and feminine energies flowing together. And that gave him the idea to use ones and zeros to communicate these logic problems numerically. So I think he fucked up because he took this thing that's supposed to flow together in balance and instead made it in all or nothing. And that's the foundation of every single piece of technology that we interact with today. So it's got us focusing on external things, looking at our phones and whatever, and like needing the adrenaline rush to like get likes or whatever. You know, just like this thing, this external thing. And I think foundationally that's skewed us in this direction that is really problematic. This is a whole other conversation. But I wonder if, and this is what came in when I was meditating, if the computing system that transcends that, if the building blocks instead of ones and zeros will have to behave more like matter, or maybe even be matter, so able to be a particle and a wave simultaneously. I wonder if it's going to be something we'll need to manipulate with our bodies rather than with hardware. Yeah, but meditation, you can have wacky insights when you're doing it. So more about the evolution of seeds. So when I was back in the States after being in Kenya and other various places, I heard about, so you guys know Farmville, right? That game that was cool, popular like 8 years ago? Yeah. So you may remember, some of you, that so after the earthquake in Haiti, which I believe was in January of 2011, Farmville did this promotion where they were like, yo, if you buy $1's worth of virtual corn or whatever in this game, we'll donate that $1 to rebuilding schools affected by the earthquake. And so they only did this for a week, I believe. And to their surprise, Zynga wasn't a philanthropically interested company. They found that making it possible to help people through your virtual goods purchase made people that had never spent money in the game something like 60% more likely to start spending. And then once that payment seal was broken, they would go on to spend on par with any other user in the game. So it turned out that helping people was the most effective way to make money in this game, which was already making a ton of money. So I heard about that, and I wondered if there was a way to build that into other types of games, if we could create a tool that would do that, and if we could scale it out so that it became available in a variety of games and eventually other types of apps, hopefully eventually at every digital point of purchase. So that's what we did. We built a tool that we can give to apps and web apps as well as mobile apps so that people can integrate a social good purchase into their app, which increases their revenue considerably. And we could then channel that capital to people in need. Initially, the focus was on microlending, channeling that capital to places like Kenya to get microloans out to people. But with the introduction of crypto, it became clear that we could do this other thing. We could create a different model. Yeah, so crypto. So I was broke for a long time. Investors ignored me. I saw other forms of, there's a lot of misogyny in the VC community as well, of course. And one time when I was reflecting on how to make it through this brokenness, I was living in New York, and I was already Airbnb my bedroom and sleeping on the couch, so I could bootstrap the company without having to invest a lot of time into making money. That's another thing I'm hoping we can free people of. This idea that we have to trade our time for money is a very limiting factor. We need to get out of that. So that said, I, had read about Bitcoin, and then when Silk Road was shut down and the Fed seized all that Bitcoin, it dropped to like $90 or something. So I started buying it then, and later, this was in I think October of 2013, and then that January it went up to like $1,100. So I was able to play that trade and make enough money to pay employees, even though investors were ignoring me. The better trade was in Litecoin at that time, so I started mining Litecoin, and I had like a 5 GPU unit set up. I set it up at a startup accelerator we were in, so we didn't have to pay for electricity, and so it worked out well. But at that time, so as I mentioned, we went through this Bitcoin-focused startup accelerator in 2014. So I knew that, the most obvious usage for us was, we could send money to Kenya, using some blockchain, and that would be cheaper than using a wire. But I trusted that there was going to be a way that this fit in because I was so interested in what it could do. And, it just seemed like the pieces hadn't aligned yet. So then I'm not sure what slide's next. So this is how it eventually became clear, come 2017, when it was so easy to make your own crypto. It's 27 lines of code, if it's an Ethereum-based token. and you can mint 1 billion tokens like in a second. So this is sort of an abstract idea, and I'm not sure how well I'll communicate it. But I was reflecting on this idea that, so we have the zero-sum system, like I make $1, you use $1 for trading. With our thing, with the addition of cryptocurrency, somebody can redeem a token of ours and say, I need $1,000 for rent. And I'll explain more about how this works here in a second. And then our community can contribute to that person. So there's something about an individual, through the usage of our token, having the ability to set the value of the currency of each individual unit. That gets us out of the zero-sum paradigm of agreement that it's $1 between two entities. And something about that, I think, is on trend with this idea of personalization for everybody, of sort of finding your own unique thing. The community has to agree to give you that $1,000. But in this way, I think we're opening things up so it's like more multidimensional and sort of this bigger pie, rather than these like supply and demand graphs all over the place that are just kind of stamped on stuff in a manufactured way. I have this. Yeah, so here's our website again. So if you have one of our tokens, and if anybody wants the tokens, not to be salesy, but we give them away on the site if you want to get some and try it out. Then you can click on Redeem a Token to ask for help at the top. When you redeem a token, you just fill out a web form. It takes a few minutes. You send us a token, and then your request for help is in our system. And we then show it through, I think we've been in about 32 apps so far. So to give you a sense of it, like if you need $1,000 for rent, Mike needs $1,000 for rent. This is Mike here. So he would pop up in the app. Seeds appears. It pulls people into the purchase flow, and because of the social good mechanism that Zynga saw was so effective, it makes people considerably more likely, 60%-ish more likely, to spend $2 in this app. And then it helps out whoever's here. So you would be there. So some other examples, we're not in Birchbox. It would be awesome to be in them. But it can also work on websites. The dream eventually is for it to be at every digital point of purchase, as I mentioned. So the requester would be there. Yeah, so I'm anticipating a future in which kids just assume, like, of course, anytime I'm using a digital tool and I can make a purchase, of course I would help somebody out. Of course I'd give somebody $1 or $2. And the community aspect of this, Jan coined this great thing I wanted to borrow, this idea, it's a digital community that we're creating using this cryptocurrency. So if you need help sometime, you can rely on the community to contribute to you as well. So it just creates this other sort of way of interacting with currency. The future. So I think the jobs as we know them, and this isn't a terribly novel idea, I think they're going to disappear, right? Like this idea, again, of going to school, getting good grades, and fitting yourself into something defined by somebody else in a sort of hierarchical structure. I think that's also patriarchal, and it's a holdover from the industrial era, right? Like we needed organizations built in such a way, if you're fighting a war, you want a general and you want everybody to behave as a sort of a cog in a machine. But as that becomes less and less necessary globally, as wars hopefully completely stop, it's not going to be, we don't need to do that. We're not, Henry Ford on the assembly line. We're going to need to be doing other things. And that doesn't mean, the world still needs ditch diggers. But as I found at the Vipassana courses, people choose to volunteer time to do cleaning tasks and so forth. I don't know what this is going to look like yet, but I think we're headed toward this different sort of model. And as jobs go away, and even I grew up in a town of 1,000 people in Ohio. There's a big opioid problem there now, and there are no jobs. And I think 5 kids from my graduating class went to 4-year institutions after school. And there's no hope there. And my best friend from high school was 17 when she had her first kid. And so she works, minimum wage jobs. And again, she can only trade so much of her time for that money. So we need to free people up from being trapped in that situation because you can't, as you can't win. So my thinking is that with these tokens, as they evolve, we've granted a variety of needs so far. We got a woman, $1,500 to put on a one-woman show at a fringe festival. What else have we done? $1,200 to help a woman go to college after coming out of stabilizing after being homeless. $100 for a girl in Pakistan to throw her mom a birthday party. There have been a variety of different types of needs, and we have one in the system now for $10,000 for a mobile home for a vet living in Portland that, I mean, we can't predict when it will be fulfilled, but it looks like it should be this year. So that'll be a big deal to buy somebody a house, right? And in the future, you know, what if you could use a token to pay for a college education in the States at a private school? Or what if you could use it to say, like, I don't know what I want to do, and I'm freaking out, and I can't handle going out into this world and pretending to fit into the system? What if you're having an existential crisis, and you could say, I need 3 months of living expenses to just take care of myself and figure out what to do next? I think that's a really exciting premise, this idea that we would have that safety net, and that we could then focus on what we're supposed to bring rather than freaking out. And like, I mean, I was broke for years, and I understand that desperation. And you can't think long term. You know, there's studies that have explored that idea, the poverty mindset. You're just stuck, and you're just trying to do the next thing. So if we could eliminate that, I think a lot more people would shift into what they're able to uniquely offer. And I think we would make a lot more money. Like, I'm fortunate because I didn't have a kid at 19 or something. I was cool with sleeping on my couch and Airbnb in my bedroom and being broke. And as a result, I started a thing and created a job that's probably a better fit for me than anything anyone else could have created. And I've employed like 30 people or whatever. So it's just, that's a better macroeconomic contribution. And I was lucky. Most people don't have that sort of the resources to be able to do that. Yeah, and then again, this idea of the most pervasive duality being this masculine-feminine energy thing. I think we're going to have to transcend that as we're moving toward unity consciousness societally. And again, relating to the Vipassana meditation thing, the structure of those courses is great. So this sort of idea of the healthy masculine providing structure, and then you're just free to go inside and clear out tons of stuff. I had a repressed memory of a rape from 10 years before come back to me in my first course, and it was like I integrated it and healed from it. And then I think in like my fourth course, I remember the memory came back to me again, and I was just like, wow, I don't have any emotional, like the charge was gone. And I grew up in a Christian, like Baptist family, essentially. And of course, the Bible says you're supposed to forgive people. And I felt like, I understand that intellectually, but how do you actually do that? And that's the other patriarchal thing, I think. We're too focused on the intellectual, and we don't focus on the experiential and sort of like everything beyond intellectual knowing in the way that we should. So yeah, it was just like, okay, now I understand what forgiveness is. You can just do this meditation, the thing leaves your body, and then all that's left is compassion and forgiveness. And it's the trippiest thing in the world. It's wonderful. The website is dhamma.org, if any of you guys are interested. The courses are free, and they feed you and house you for free as well. And you can choose to make a donation at the end if you want, but they don't pressure at all. So that's actually been that model really informs the way I'm thinking about Seeds, because it's nonprofit, and it's the most efficient organization I think I've ever interacted with, of like for-profit or nonprofit. Arguably, like some Stripe's pretty good, but yeah. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't put it up on one of the sites. Dhamma is DHAMMA.org is the site. Yeah, I can't recommend it more highly. They're wonderful. And there's one, Joshua Tree. There are like 200 centers all around the world. Yeah. So yeah, to end this, I want to leave you guys with this question. If you didn't have to worry about fitting yourself in societally to within a paradigm defined by an external source, and if you had the space you needed to really hone in on what you're uniquely wanting to offer, I want to invite you to consider, like, if you had a tool to do that, what would you create? What could you bring into the world if you had those sort of tools in place? That's what we're hoping to invite people to consider and to give to people through Seeds. Yeah, so this is Seeds. There's my email, Twitter. Thank you, guys.
Q&A. Thank you, Rachel. That was fascinating, and thank you for calling me out for needing that $1,000 for rent. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. I'll pass the mic to John. This is a great time to ask questions about her journey, about Seeds, about cryptocurrency, about the masculine and feminine energy. Not a great time to talk about how you lost so much money in Bitcoin when you were trying to trade and you didn't know what you're doing.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I would have say that I think today's talk was probably the most intellectually stimulating that I've heard.
Wow. That's a very high compliment. I appreciate that.
In all the years that I've been involved with Friday Coffee Meetup.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. You're providing a vision of a future that's much more appealing and enrolling to me than I've seen recently. So thank you.
Thank you.
And what I'm hearing, I'm not sure it's correct exactly, is taking the what I grew up in is the insular small family and making the extended family not just my relatives but the entire planet. And I really am enrolled in that. And I think your website, your goal speaks to that. I've long been an opponent of the capitalism in the financial world, but not the market. I believe the market works. The market will always be there. As we get to zero marginal cost on production of items, we need to change how we represent our own personal value. Like, it can't be what I do, my job, or whatever, for someone else. And I think this is, I'm really inspired. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly value exchange that is mutually beneficial. That's a good thing, and I don't think that's going to go away. But how we determine that value, I think, is shifting, as you say. Yeah. Yeah.
2 questions. First, what's your last name?
My last name is Cook.
Cook, okay. And second, I'm about a year and a half into an organization called Community 2.0, trying to create the community that we really want instead of the one that we've been given.
Cool.
So I'd love to talk to you more about how your ideas will manifest and can manifest in our community, first here in the Pasadena area. Right now we're focusing on combating the climate crisis, but eventually just creating a better world. So I'd love to get your card and let's talk.
Sounds good. What was your name?
Greg Apodaca.
Greg Apodaca. Right on. That sounds wonderful.
What happened to the film? I want to see it.
Yeah, it was the feature presentation at the Chicago Social Change Film Fest, a third-tier festival. I was never able to get distribution. We basically ran out of money. So this is also a tool to solve problems I have seen in terms of getting money. I'd love to... At the end, I felt like I couldn't even look at it clearly. I was just so close to it. I haven't watched it in years. At some point, I'd love to go revisit some of these women to see how they're doing now, and with the proper support, put it out there sort of maybe with a cryptocurrency sort of addendum. But it was hard, and it was good training for founding a company later, though. Yeah, thank you for asking. Hi.
Very inspiring.
Thanks.
So someone donates money to Seeds, right? There's actually $1 or $2 or something through, we have how is the money handled in the tax system? I'm always kind of wondering about like these GoFundMes and everything. That's my background. I'm like, how do you account for all of that?
Sure. So I can say that this idea of binaries, I think, is also this patriarchal thing. Nonprofit, for-profit. I think we want to get past that. Our thing is for-profit for several reasons. One is that the App Store would kick the transaction out of the app if we were a nonprofit, which kills your conversion. So the App Store still gets a big chunk of that contribution, but it allows us to source the capital through these apps. You can also contribute if you're interested in giving to a request for help through our website. And we're going to have a wide variety of products, I think, ultimately that will facilitate that. But yeah, it's not tax deductible or anything. You're just giving the funds. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, this is something else we're going to have to, it's gross revenue. So we're paying taxes on the gross revenue coming in, even though we're paying out gifts. But I'm hoping to find sort of an innovative tax person in the future who can help us kind of navigate it an alternate way, because I don't know of any other models that are anything like this. Being a B Corp wouldn't address this. So, but yeah, it's a little bit of the Wild West in that area. Yeah, but we pay our taxes and we've been cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Rachel back here. Question.
Yes.
Hey, so I work in crypto too, and like the past week has been really interesting in terms of like the overall rhetoric around crypto, especially with like Facebook's Libra.
Right.
If you go to their site, the first thing you see is like reinvent money, transform the global economy, so everyone everywhere can live better lives. And I'm just concerned that like the way that like crypto is being used, where these underbanked people are almost like a human shield, as I don't know, like just trying to justify what we're doing here, or like how Facebook is talking about that is just getting away from what it's actually about. So I'm kind of curious about your thoughts about Libra and what they're talking about overall.
I mean, I think this is a value judgment, and I'm trying to like meditate my way out of those. But I think Facebook is fucking evil. And I think it's hilarious that they did this. I have a friend who's working on their blockchain project. She just started at Kiva, and she was talking about how their CEO, Kiva, is on the board of 29 companies on the Libra board, and the corporations involved had to pay a ton of money to be on this board. And it's just like they're doing everything in the wrong way, I think. It's like they fundamentally misunderstand the beauty of what this can offer. My hope with our thing is that when we were focusing on microlending and funneling money to make microloans in Kenya, we weren't asking people what they needed money for. Like with the token, we've had a community of people in South Sudan redeem Seeds tokens to like build a playground in a slum, to open a personal hygiene stand. Those people told us what they needed money for. We didn't come in all like white people and be like, yo, here's this, use it this way. So yeah, Libra isn't even thinking about that. And I think it is good. Joe Lubin said this, you probably saw. He said, like, this will be good in that people will become familiar with using wallets. It's probable that, like wallets that can hold tokens will be in Messenger, I would assume. That'll be really helpful when we're trying to send money to South Sudan, because right now it's hard. So it's just, I think it's so fast. We're in this really fascinating time, right? Like, we're alive at such an interesting time. And this is a big corporate part of what will bring this to where it's going to go, but it's kind of hilarious and misguided, very misguided at the same time. Yeah.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for the presentation. It's very inspiring.
My pleasure.
So as you mentioned, that the way like Libra doesn't actually think about like how to actually deliver that value to the people really need. Mm-hmm. So my question is, like, in current your model is like you get money from the app, but then how you ensure that money actually goes to people you need, and you work with like the microfinance institutions, or you actually have a team actually talk to the people and manage all these operations?
Good question. So we'll see if this becomes problematic at any point in the future. But aligning with that like Ken Wilber idea, of society is evolving. We're trusting people to tell us what they need the money for and then to use it as they see fit. So I'm not interested in policing how anyone's using money. It's not a loan, it's a gift. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We're just letting them tell us. And if in the future, somebody uses money to buy guns or whatever, this is a separate philosophical discussion, but I don't know what I think about the responsibility for a platform for the behavior of the users of that platform. But to date, people have been really lovely. We've seen people have volunteered to send evidence of what they did with the money. So I want to rely on trusting people and assuming that more and more of us are going to become more and more trustworthy as we continue to evolve. We'll see if that bites me in the ass at any point. But if it does, we'll address it when that happens. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi again. I do have a question, but first to gift you, the person who asked about the taxes, if you're actually under $10,000 per transaction, treat them all as gifts, both income and outcome. Huh. And the gift laws are pretty lenient in the United States.
That is really good to know. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you.
Question came up when you mentioned the Facebook. I'm concerned about Bitcoin currencies, not Bitcoin itself, because that, I think, was set up properly for it can't be centralized. It would require 51% of the existing computational power being applied to actually try to get past it. Whereas all these individually set up Bitcoin systems, or blockchain systems rather, not Bitcoin, blockchain systems, I think are very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Anytime a bank sets up, and I'm wondering what's being done to protect us all from that, because that scares me a lot. I love the Bitcoin ledger issue, fixing value when the value transaction happens and not allowing it to change afterwards for that transaction.
Yeah.
But these others, the banks, to me, if they own the computer that's making the Bitcoin, they can change the transaction at any time.
Right. Are any of you guys familiar with Chris Dixon? He's sort of a fancy angel investor. He's a smart guy, I'd say. He wrote this Medium piece called Why Decentralization Matters that you may be interested in checking out. And he talks about how platforms behave well at the beginning when they need users. Like Facebook had a smart distribution strategy in the early days and rolled it out at college after college, and people wanted to be on it. Once they had a certain critical mass, they started to behave poorly. And that's a problem with any centralized entity, I think, including us. It's something I'm trying to be very mindful of right now. Even, Airbnb is another example. They were great at the beginning. I love them so much. I couldn't have done this without them. Eventually, my apartment got robbed by a guest, and somebody stole a laptop with like 20 grand worth of Litecoin on it. And they didn't care. And they can do that now because they don't need to care about hosts. So it's the nature of the design of centralized entities, I think. So because, for instance, in our case, we're built on Ethereum, we can take advantage of all of those sort of well-designed mechanisms that Ethereum also has, as well as Bitcoin, and the transactions are faster. Yeah, but I don't have an easy answer for that. I don't want to use like JP Morgan's crypto or stuff like that. But I also want us to be very thoughtful about how not to replicate those problems that even well-meaning companies like Airbnb, I think, they didn't want to do that, but they screwed me over, and it was painful. And that's, if it's decentralized, that isn't the case. So our tech is open source. We're moving to take more steps to involve more developers in a broader sense who aren't full-time employees. So I'm trying to be thoughtful about the way we'll work in the future and how people can contribute small amounts if they want to, which I think is part of this decentralization organizational system that will hopefully help to prevent that from being an issue. I don't think this answers your question very well, but yeah, it's a gnarly problem. We don't have those models yet, I think, in the world. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was great.
Pleasure.
I loved it.
Thank you.
So my question is a little bit more basic. If you could go over the tech behind, or the business tech of the business. Like, I'm really curious, okay, you buy a token, then seeds will transform that or buys Bitcoin, and then what happens? Is there already a network set up as far as blockchain that I guess different people know of that transaction until it gets to the user, where I guess they redeem it in dollars or whatever their currency? If you could go over that a little bit at the basic level, it would be great.
Okay, so how the tech interacts with blockchain, you mean? Yeah.
How your business, I guess, uses blockchain to actually do the business model, where I understand that the business model is through these apps. You allow people to make gifts that actually help people in need.
Sure. Okay. Where should I start? So we minted this cryptocurrency, which was very easy to do. Anyone could do it. It's like 27 lines of code, like I said. It solved several problems for us in a business-related sense rather than a tech-related sense, in that when we were funneling capital to microlenders and trying to get apps to use our tool, it was very business-driven sales, and we couldn't talk to the end users in a significant way. So with the token, we could distribute the tokens to people who wanted to redeem them, who would use apps as well, and we could let them tell us what they wanted or needed. So it solved this problem of sort of this two-sided market, which doesn't really answer your question. It also solved the problem of investors not investing in me. So we were able to sell the token, and that created this alternate revenue stream, which was helpful. That said, nothing is happening on the chain currently. I think this is the year for building infrastructure within the Ethereum universe so that on-chain transactions will be faster. So right now, we're not tracking somebody's request for help on the chain. It's just we're using the token and we're planning to build that out when it makes technological and business sense. So somebody redeems a token, we put it into the apps via an SDK product. So it's kind of like a container that exists within the app, and we show different things through that. And then contributions come through. We charge the apps just using Stripe, and then we funnel the capital to the requester. We've been paying out in Ethereum because most of our users aren't crypto savvy. We're really focusing on getting this out to women, particularly women of color. I think that's how it can really succeed. And we want them to understand the benefits of crypto. So we're trying to help onboard them. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so I understand that I guess at this point you're not really using blockchain so much as you're actually facilitating almost like a minimum viable product of your business model. And then once you scale it, you're probably going to looking to use blockchain.
Right. Yeah. There's
Thank you.
Right. Yeah. If you guys are familiar with Paul Graham's essays, the guy one of the co-founders of Y Combinator, he has some really thoughtful essays. One is about how in the beginning, but we've been around for a bit, but you do things manually and then you automate the bottlenecks. I think with a lot of token sales, when that was like crazy and wild in 2017, people were like, blockchain, like blah, whatever. And they would like try to shoehorn in a use case for that when it didn't necessarily make sense. And so I feel a little embarrassed, like I'm supposed to be like, yo, we're doing this really advanced thing, building on the block, whatever. But that doesn't make sense for our goal at this time. So we're not, yeah.
Rachel, one last question.
Yes.
A little bit more basic question, I guess. You got this idea because of somebody you met in Kenya that was using texting and exchanging or doing transactions and things like that. And you came back to the U.S. and you came up with this idea for seeds. You couldn't find any investors. So you kind of basically self-funded this through cryptocurrency that you were mining yourself. How were you able to put together a development team? Because you don't have a coding background or anything like that. And a lot of people here have had similar questions is, how do I build a team to come up with an app or whatever platform in order to execute this idea that I have?
Yeah, sure. We did raise a little over $1 million eventually, as I mentioned. It's just like, how do I answer that question? It was like I was broke, and then there'd be a little bit of money, and then onward. So in the early days, I went to Duke, as I mentioned, and they had like a startup competition, and we were finalists, and so I raised some money from some Duke investors. And then, but yeah, I was like sleeping on my couch and Airbnb and crypto. So I think it's important, maybe this is good advice, don't think about getting money, think about building a thing that people are using, and then if they're using it, you'll see where you need money to scale that out. So I think a lot of people think they need to start with the money. And that said, if you're non-technical, I would say that I'm like a founder. So I'm a remedial coder at this point. I think what I'm good at is seeing the problem in front of us, and hopefully down the line as well, and getting competent enough to solve that problem before the next problem is there that I have no idea how to solve, and so on. So if you believe in your idea and you're into what you're doing, you'll figure out a way. I read a blog post about another founder that slept on her couch and Airbnb'd her room, and so I did that, and that wouldn't have occurred to me. Things present themselves if you're doing the thing that I think you're meant to do. So it's not easy. It hasn't been easy for me anyway, but having a 9-to-5 that you hate is way fucking harder, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.